Hi, I'm Jeremy Crosby.
And I'm Nick Boucher. We're your hosts for the program that's all about your city, Talking Fitchburg.
Every weekday, we pull together the news, events, and information you need to stay on top of what's happening in the city of Fitchburg.
Find Talking Fitchburg on cable TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and our live stream on the web. Plus, you can find all our headlines and stories on Facebook, YouTube, and our video on demand service. This is your city.
Keep up with Talking Fitchburg and the issues affecting you and your neighbors.
Get connected, Fitchburg. We're launching Fitchburg Connect, the city's new monthly e-newsletter that keeps you informed about all the events, services, and updates that matter to you. Get it in your inbox once a month. Sign up today to get Fitchburg Connect.
I call to order the meeting of the Committee of the Whole on May 27th, 2026 at 6:30 p.m. First item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next is roll call. Administrator Brecklin, will you help us out?
Absolutely. Mayor Arata Ferrata is present, but currently on a phone call just outside the chambers. Alder Dantzler Jr.
Present.
Alder Gerhardt.
Here.
Alder Herbst.
Here.
Alder Jetzer.
Here.
Alder Laduse.
Here.
Alder Lepper.
Here.
Alder Maldonado.
Here.
And Alder Reichstedt.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Wonderful. Our next item is approval of minutes. I'll need a motion on the draft minutes of April 22nd, 2022.
I'll move to approval.
Second.
Motion to approve and seconded. Any comments, questions? Seeing none, all in favor of adopting the draft minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Next item is public appearances for non-agenda items. We have nobody in chambers and nobody online for non-agenda items. So we'll move on to our agenda items. First up is City Hall, Senior Center, and Community Center remodel project. We have Don O'Crowley, our architect, and then also our City Administrator, Chad Brecklin, and our Deputy City Administrator, Adam Sayer. Sayer? Yeah, okay, great. I never said your last name out loud, I realized. Wonderful. So who is going to kick us off?
I'll kick it off, and
Wonderful.
then between the three of us, we'll probably just kind of tag team this presentation. So thanks for having us tonight. Wanted to provide the council with an overview of the City Hall kind of campus renovations. Dawn O'Crowley is here tonight from O'Crowley 646 Designs. She'll also be doing the bulk of this presentation kind of once we get into it. We did hire Dawn, I think about 9 months ago. She did a space needs analysis for us, so she's part of that. She met with department heads, staff, kind of talked about what kind of needs are out there. And what's driving this is obviously what's going on across the street, which is the construction of the new police facility. So once the police department moves out of this building, which I believe is Q1 of next year, they currently occupy a large portion of the basement and also the first floor. So that is going to be area that is available for potential usage by other city departments and better utilizing that space. The building itself that we're in here tonight is approximately 25, 30 years old. I've gotten a lot of life out of it. And this is a project that we initially had looked at as we're going to have space when the police move out. But we've started to take a larger look at this project as, we've gotten 25, 30 years out of this building. Should we be looking kind of at a larger project to make sure we can get another, hopefully 30 to 50 years out of this building? I know for myself and probably Chad especially, as we look at these spaces, part of what I look at is, how do we attract people to come that want to work here? And ultimately also, how do we retain people and trying to create an environment that they want to come work in and continue to work in as well. So we'll kind of go through some of the comments here tonight too, but just kind of wanted to start that off of this is what's kind of driving kind of why we're here tonight. If you want to go to the next slide. So next slide just has a quick overview of kind of some of the departments we talked to, looked at, then also the existing buildings. So the building itself is approximately 49,000 square feet. About 25 of that is the first floor and the basement. And right now, just for sake of what we're talking about, this is the second floor. It's kind of confusing. Below us is the police department on the first floor, and there's another floor below that, which is the basement. And then above us is the third floor, which is where Public Works, Planning, and those departments and Building Inspection are located. We did close off the third floor access, I believe, at the beginning of this year. And part of that, and I'll have a few pictures here to show you, is we've got some space up there that could be better utilized as well too. So once again, we're looking to create a sense of place that reflects our community character and also is a place that employees want to live and work. Or not live and work, but actually work at and stay at. So a few pictures here just to give you a variety. I'm not sure how often people kind of get behind the front counter and kind of can see this, but a few things here just wanted to point out. This is kind of the current environment. Part of the project as we worked with Dawn was, how do we get more light into this space? Most of our offices are above or next to those exterior windows, and as you kind of get in those cubicle areas, it gets rather dark at times. So as part of this project, how do we open up more natural light? Because there is not much natural light in those areas. It's all cubes behind the kind of the glass over there. There's a conference room, but it's just workstations and cubes. Most of this, for the most part, my understanding, is unchanged from when this building was built back that 25, 30 years ago. So the workstations, for the most part, are still the existing workstations that have been there for that amount of time. The carpet, I have some carpet pictures coming up here. Carpet's the same as well too. So this is the break room. I tend to call it kind of sad at times. It's not it's dated. I mean, it functions. It serves a purpose, but it's just dated. So as part of this project and working with Dawn, creating a break room that people actually want to hang out with and collaborate and actually enjoy spending time in, and not just have their phone in front of them and hopefully actually talk to people and have some interactions. Picture of a light pole is actually out back. So as part of this project too, one of the comments we heard from staff was the parking lots are dark when they leave council meetings or committee meetings. The parking lots are just, it's dark, and it concerns some employees from a security standpoint. Nothing's ever happened, but just it's a constant comment I've heard over my years here. And the picture on the right there is one of the poles in the back, and it's hard to see, but if you look at some of our poles in the back, the paint's actually worn off completely on one side. And if you look at the tops of the poles as well, it's that silver. It's supposed to be that like reddish type color. It's all just completely worn off. So as part of this project, we're looking at new lighting outside, which would include new light poles. That would be a refresh from a lighting standpoint, but also just from a look standpoint, since these are completely worn out. This is the third floor. So on the top left there, that's the vestibule entryway from that people used to stand at that front counter. That's currently just wasted space because the third floor has been closed off to the public. So as part of Dawn's work, she's kind of reorganizing that entire area. We're going to get some use out of that because right now it is not being used. And the picture on the right just kind of shows some of the carpet issues we're starting to have. That's carpet that's actually kind of pulling up there. It's kind of just pulling from the middle. So every little lump you kind of see in that picture on the right is the carpet actually bunching up. So obviously new carpet's going to be part of the project too.
And that carpet is original equipment from this building?
Yeah.
Wow, that's not bad.
It's held up, yeah. It's held up. I mean, you can see the track pattern in that where you can see actually people walk, and that's a common thing you see, but it hasn't worn through, but it's really starting to show its age. This is still up on the third floor for the most part, just once again showing what the lighting is in there. It's dark at times. Picture on the right just shows one of the stairwells. Those are just worn out. Those are worn out from 25, 30 years of people walking up and down the stairs. So the treads any type of grip on those treads are gone, and that's pretty consistent throughout the project here. And then lastly, I think this is the last pictures. This is the basement. This is actually where our IT department is housed. So they are in a room in the basement. That's the former EOC space. There are no windows in that room. So they are literally below ground, no windows, and it's a common comment from our IT department of just say it'd be nice to have some light in here at some point. They're in the basement because we are out of space. I actually myself took their former space when I started here with the city. So when I started, they were moved to the basement. That's an apartment of 4 or 5 people. So before I came here, they were all in the office I'm in right now. And I think it was 3 or 4 people huddled into that office. And when I started, they were moved to the basement. They're crowded. They don't have a really good spot to work. So if they have to work on a workstation, they're typically in the middle there working, or at their cubicle or at their workstation. But they don't have actual stands where IT staff typically will be able to actually like tool bench, almost working on the type of machine or a server. So we're lacking that right now. Anything you want to add, Chad?
I just want to clarify that Adam did not displace them entirely. There were 3 in his space, and then when we added a 4th, there was no way to fit a 4th into that space, which is a converted conference room, by the way, when the City Hall first opened. So there have been a number of modifications to where people are housed, so to speak, for their workday. But Adam's not the sole reason they were displaced. So
appreciate that. You go to the next one. So these are just kind of the general kind of guidelines, objectives, visions that the staff we had kind of for the project. I'll email this out after tonight, so you'll get a copy of this presentation. There's going to be some smaller diagrams and drawings that Dawn's going to go through here in a few seconds. But this is just some of the feedback that we received as part of that. Like I said, I'll send it out. You can read it then. Like I said, this project has expanded in kind of the original scope we looked at. I think this was initially budgeted as a $6 million project, and as part of the CIP that's coming forward, we're requesting additional funding for it. They'll bring it to a $12 million project. So once again, we're looking at this entire building, but we're also actually looking at the community center and senior center as well too. So we're looking at those spaces. That building's older than City Hall. The senior center has been, I think, remodeled once and obviously added on to. But looking at improvements that we can make for the rec department, we've got some dead space at the end of the main hall, but then also looking at the senior center area with their offices and adding some additional security. And I say security in the sense of right now, anybody can go down there, just walk into Jill's office or Mandy's office, just trying to have a little more control so they can focus on what they're doing and kind of have those areas where they can actually get their work done. But then also in the senior center, looking at making that kitchen bigger. There's been conversations about a commercial kitchen down there. It's not going to be commercial to code per se, but it's going to be a larger, more functional kitchen space that they'll be able to do different additional meal planning and meal preparation in there as well. So we're looking at making improvements there as part of this project as well. Anything else, Chad, you want to add? So that, I'll turn over to Dawn. Dawn's going to do a presentation here. I'll not put words in your mouth, but she gave a very similar presentation already to city staff. It's just an overview, kind of what we're looking at, the functionality of just the spaces, and just more importantly, the flexibility of spaces. And that's, you'll kind of see that through her presentation. If you have questions, I just interrupt her and ask.
Go for it. Thank you. Great, thanks. And it's wonderful to be back. I actually was your architect for the addition to the senior center. So it's wonderful to be back and work with your team again. I'm just going to note that the kind of resounding goal was to create a sense of place that reflects and continues to support the forward progress and innovation being made as a city. I've heard that repeatedly from all of the department heads, and then the follow-up presentation was kind of the feedback of what we heard we needed to make sure we were right-sizing things, make sure we were hitting the mark on all of the goals. One of the big ones was variety in workspaces type. You kind of saw from the photos, there are a couple different workspaces, your workstation or your office or a few conference rooms. I think there's only one conference room on the 3rd floor right now, and public meeting spaces. You all know the 2 main spaces on this floor, another supplemental meeting space. That was really the big goal. How do we create more meeting spaces, variety of spaces, and just places to meet with the public in between meetings or before or after meetings? So one of the needs was a little bit bigger conference room to fit 21 to 28, so all departments' heads could be in the space at one time. So this study on the right, so we did, these are called room diagrams, where we actually looked in detail, well, how do we achieve more people meeting in that space? So this is the Genie Ceiling meeting room, now seating 24. That's just done on the bottom left image. You can see the idea of bringing in some benching or some other type of seating in the conference spaces, maybe just a table to pull up to take notes. But today, the Genie Ceiling Conference Room on this view looking towards your parking lot has 2 windows. This would just expand it just that bit more to have 3 windows, and then it now achieves getting all of the department heads in one space. Similarly, the need for a larger flexible meeting room, we're calling it 28-person meeting room, tables and chairs so we can break it out for different types of functions. Neighborhood planning meetings, for example. This diagram is one room that we're proposing adding with 4 different furniture layouts using all of the same furniture in each layout. Just the flexibility, not a lot of tear down, not a lot of setup time. That's a challenge in the community center today. But this is a way that we're trying to achieve meeting that need for about a 30-person meeting room.
So if you've ever been in any of our rooms, Genie Ceiling, obviously, if you look at those tables do not move. I mean, they weigh, I'm not sure how much they weigh. So part of this, as we looked at this, all these spaces, was how to be flexible. How can we use that space just in different configurations? That came, I know, from the planning department of if they're meeting with neighbors, if they're having small group work sessions, rearranging those tables, because right now we do not have that flexibility. And when Dawn references department head meetings, so every Tuesday before each council meeting, all department heads meet with the mayor. We go over the council agenda. We kind of do updates from each department. We currently don't fit around that table. We've got so many employees, and if anyone else kind of shows up to that, they're sitting around there, so not everyone's at the table. We're just literally out of room. We've looked at using this space, but if you look at these chairs back here, and the reason they're stacked in the corner, they don't really stack. So we've got a pile of those downstairs right now in the basement that are stacked up as well. So for a while, if you came in here, there was even more chairs stacked in that corner. They don't stack on carts. They weigh a ton, and they're a pain to move. So everything we were trying to look at is trying to set ourselves up so it's easily movable, easily modifiable, so we can use these spaces for a variety of different things. So as she kind of goes through this, you'll see that of this flexibility of not just this is the setup. It's like, well, this is the setup if you're doing X, or if you're doing Y, you can do this. So just trying to create this as flexibility. Sorry.
No, it's wonderful. And into the future. So there's not a costly renovation project for future generations. Trying to fit this in, rough this in, and understanding we work differently now than we worked when this building was built. And one can anticipate that again. So this is this area of the floor plan. So the biggest goal we are trying to do is create the public space on this floor plan to get as many public meeting rooms as possible, and then have the ability, once we have the reception solely being located on the second floor, on this floor, to then have that space be the staff secured space. So this diagram shows in the middle, there's that 30-person meeting room located on this floor. So FACTv would then have 2 smaller control booths, one supporting Genie Ceiling's room, one supporting this room, as well as the new 30-person meeting room. I'll just touch on egress a bit to secure the staff side of the space. And today, if we were to leave this meeting, we could choose to either go down the main corridor to the primary entrance, or we could take the stairwell. Once we're in the stairwell, we have access to all floors of staff space. So the ability to create a different egress route for the public and staff for all to use, that allows the staff space to be secured. So you'll see when you leave council chambers, we're calling it a flex meeting space, just some flexible furniture, so you have the ability to stop and speak with other members of the public or each other. And then you would continue to the right and take a corridor that would lead directly towards the parking lot front entrance side of the building. So you'd have a second accessible exit from this space. You could choose to either take that, we're calling it an emergency egress only corridor, or you would take the walk to the main entrance rather than down the stairs to the police entrance.
And part of the reason we did that too is the space right outside this building, or this room, I mean, it's dead space. I mean, there's really it doesn't get used. I mean, park bikes out there, or we put a Christmas tree up there, or people stand out there outside of meetings. So the thought process was trying to create a space out there that if even Misty's in the back here working on her laptop, she could possibly sit in that space, wait for her item to come up and be back in there working. Or if there's a developer here and need to have a conversation with them, or if after the meeting, if you want to step in there with a constituent, someone in the audience, you could have a private conversation in that area that's right off the council chambers and it's close by. But that would also be a space during the day that, if there isn't a meeting space, if you're meeting with a resident, you could possibly use that space as well too. They'd walk right in and there's the space. So trying to create those spaces from areas that are underutilized right now as well.
And that space, it wouldn't be acoustically, a private conference room. So I think people would be aware of chambers being near and treat it as though it's still within the public corridor space to respect what's occurring in chambers. Other types of meeting spaces, like we mentioned, flexibility. There's a conference room for 6, a small flex room for 2 people to meet privately or quick take a phone call. One of the typical meeting sizes we heard requested would be a group of up to 8 people, kind of traditional conference room style. Focus rooms where 1 or 2 people could work on a project or take a phone call, do a virtual meeting. And this just kind of encompasses the different variety of types of workspaces that would allow everyone to collaborate differently.
And the ideas you see in here right now, we haven't selected any furniture. I mean, these are just kind of concepts and ideas that are just being discussed and mostly being held from a space standpoint. Yep. So no decisions have been made on, as you kind of see some images here, there's just examples only.
Just to make sure we're right sizing for the space planning. In terms of workstations, we've looked at the types of workstations people need to function, and with dual monitors or triple monitors, I understand. And then on the bottom right of the image is a typical office size, 9 by 13, smaller than what's currently in the building, with the primary idea that often the offices won't be located on the glass, but they would have glass near their door that then they could see through their side light, through that glass over the workstations. So the workstations we're proposing is called seated height privacy. So it's a panel, if you were in your office or walking in the corridor spaces, you would still be able to see daylight. We would have the option for some areas, maybe it's near a busy area, we could get a little taller space or some personal storage that helps kind of confine the space if you're doing a focused task but are not using one of the other rooms. Similarly, touchdown spaces and workstations, something that you could just pop into before or after a meeting where technology easily flows. The break room, this is one of the bigger volume changes. So the bottom 2 images are concept renderings. The left image, I should say the center image on the bottom, that is now showing that the break room would actually have access to daylight. This would be located on the first floor, which is currently the police facilities level, which does not have any access to daylight. So that's one exterior area where we're trying to gain more daylight. And we're also looking at exposing more structure because as the footprint gets larger, you want a little more volume to handle that. Here's an example of a photo you saw, your before photos. The upper right, it was a project I worked with Dane County on for human services. The image on the left, you can just see a peek of one of those squares of that window, but we opened it up, got more access to daylight, opened up the ceiling heights. So this is human services. So it's respite for staff, collaboration for staff. It's pretty well received. Here's the entire campus that we studied. So on the left, you can see the 4 floor plans of City Hall. On the right, the 2 floors of Community Center. I'll do a quick walk through each floor. The big thing I hope these diagrams share, the dark blue space, including the room we're in now, those are all the public meeting spaces. So really trying to focus those on this floor right off the main corridor. If you see dark green spaces, those are staff, more enclosed spaces, offices, meeting rooms. The lighter green, those spaces will be staff, collaborative spaces, a little more open. And the purple spaces are things that are staying in place, like mechanical systems, IT infrastructure, getting an IT closet on every floor. So here we are on this floor. We walked through kind of the bottom part of the plan, which is this side of the building, the public meeting room spaces. We're gaining another 8-person conference room on the other side of the corridor. So the reconfiguring, we'll have reception for all floors on this location. We'll have kind of towards the top right of the drawing, we'll have additional public service windows for court staff. Finance staff will also hop on and use those during tax season. The departments in this area, finance assessors, court, the clerk, to gain visibility for the clerk from the work area and the secure work area, we're trying to get the staff to, the public to approach the counter kind of from the east, from the right side of the drawing. Conference rooms, mayor's office, attorney's office, admin offices. And again, the idea that when you're walking through the space, you will always have the ability to see outdoors. And on long walks on corridors, that's a focal view that you would have windows or glass, collaborative areas, or we tried to get some flex spaces near that glass to share that daylight. This is the first floor, so down one floor. Maintaining some of the spaces for the police facility, the Sally Port, building management, utilizing those spaces for storage and a workroom, not doing a lot of structural reconfiguration of things. Building management would be relocating to this level, freeing up some space in the library basement. FACTv would be locating to this floor, as well as their studio, which because they're currently located next door to us on this level, opening that space up for the 30-person meeting room. IT would be relocating up one level to this floor to have some access to daylight. This is the level with the break room. And in addition to the break room, we're trying to create daylight on this level in an area well that would then reach down to the basement. There's actually currently a stair that the police department uses between the two levels. In the future, that won't be needed. So on the bottom left, we'll actually be able to get some daylight from above on the first floor into what is entirely subgrade in the basement today. So that's just the one little spot with daylight. The expanded fitness room is adjacent to that daylight, reusing the existing locker spaces for the police facility. Election storage is moving to this floor arranged by 8 voting districts along with the election meeting room. That's actually evidence storage and is very well repurposed to remove election storage from various locations within the building today.
Yeah, that's a big challenge for us. So if you've ever been in the conference room kind of on the other side in the staff portion, you see those kind of black kind of bins, boxes. It's all election materials. They're kind of scattered around the building in various spots, but they have to be secured. So all of that stuff would end up in this room, and also the rest of their stuff that's in some random storage areas throughout the city. There's a lot of equipment, there's a lot of supplies that go with that. That would all be relocated down here to the basement.
This is up to the third floor. You mentioned the no longer having a reception desk, a public reception desk on third floor. That opened up opportunities to create more collaborative spaces. All of the departments that are on this level are still on this level. Planning, public works, building inspection. We're also bringing economic development up to this level. And having conference rooms, the small flex rooms to take a phone call or do a virtual meeting. We also looked at the idea in the main entranceway, the vestibule that you walk in, that double height space. This actually claims that upper level as a meeting room on the third level. That's in dark green on the lower right-hand corner of the drawing. And then just adjacent to that, to get to circulate into that space from the office space, is just a little open platform space, another open little collaborative space. We're calling that open flex. Similarly, on the opposite end of the corridor, this end of the corridor, we're proposing a small open flex space on the upper level, which then allows us to get those glass walls in place for this flex meeting room at the end of this corridor. It would still remain double height at the end of the space. Or the community center, the real change on this floor, when you currently enter the vestibule, the reception window is to your right when you're still in the airlock vestibule. To make it more welcoming, and I think Jill said 40% of the senior center users actually use this upper level entrance. We're proposing just enclosing the current outdoor stair tower with glass. That allows then the reception to occur in the main corridor, expanding park space a bit, looking at some different furniture opportunities.
This is another example of people that come, when they visit the recreation office, they can just walk right in that door, which I know creates disruptions for them. So this would add that reception window and then a private staff door. They would also expand as part of this too, kind of into that existing kitchen that's next to Oak Hall. So there needs to be, we need additional space in there also for when we have summer employees. There's no room in there for any additional summer employees with the current office configuration.
And the need for storage, we heard overwhelmingly. On the lower level of the senior center, similarly, improving the reception desk a bit, enclosing that some more, and creating an office suite. Today, the kitchen is essentially freestanding within the floor plan, and there's a hallway that runs around it like a donut. Well, we're trying to claim that unused corridor space to now have an office suite, which still maintains exiting and safety, and then have the ability to expand the kitchen a bit to gain pantry storage. The health room, you'd access it a little bit differently when you have an appointment in the health room. Swan Creek, just a bit of change to increase storage for that space. This is a look if you were at the entrance end of the corridor. This isn't a material study or finishes yet. This was just purely massing on how to be lightweight in inserting the space to the platform space to the new meeting space. And I've worked in historic architecture quite a bit and respecting the character defining features of the existing building. The bottom right is kind of the idea of the all glass doors and windows that would then keep your view down this corridor very much similar to today.
So that last one was right above as you come in the main door. So it's that there'd be you kind of see the little platform on top and a small conference room above the existing vestibule. So that'd be a pretty drastic and different kind of change, with the goal of hopefully pulling more people into be able to see that front counter and also look down that new hallway towards courts.
Thank you. Upper right image is then when you're in the corridor, you're in a one-story space rather than entering the double height space like you do immediately today. We're hoping that will then naturally start directing the public so that county clerk can have better visibility to those counters and can help out the public right away. This is the landscape architectural concept. The big kind of description that we heard is to soften the building, particularly what is currently a 3-story entry tower for the police department. Softening that landscape, making that a space that it doesn't call out as a public entrance. So then the public wayfinding naturally comes to your primary City Hall stair tower or entry tower on this level. This shows the egress path we'd be adding on this floor to then get the second accessible egress route. And then just a bit of softening of the landscape between the community center and City Hall to kind of unify this entry. It makes me think a bit more in kind with your library landscaping, that the trees are tighter to the building, just a little bit softer space. This is our first rendering of what that landscape would look like, would start to feel like. The success in this study rendering, I think we're able to make the egress path just an egress path. It won't distract from the entry sequence. And then this is a view from the west side. On the right of the image is the current police entry tower. Softening that a bit again, introducing a pergola. It's on the west side of the building. So then consistently, each of the buildings on campus would have a small pergola space. And then the introduction of a handful of windows on this west facade to increase that daylight. And this is the last image. Just in terms of your overall campus character, very, very much just the image of the stair towers, infilling that glass for the community center entrance, really maintaining the current City Hall entrance, and then just the softening of what is currently the police entrance. Yeah?
So I think that's the end of your presentation.
Yeah.
Just to kind of wrap up here, one thing that I didn't mention is, as we've looked at this, we've planned for our existing staff, but then we also looked at our future staff counts, knowing obviously budget constraints and whatnot. We've built into this additional capacity if we add more employees. So trying to set ourselves up that in each area, there's the ability to easily add those workstations or shift somebody into one of those kind of smaller 1 to 2 room conference rooms that we could shift an employee in there and move people around a lot easier versus now we're kind of tapped out in our space, especially on this floor. It's a challenge for us. So this does set us up so we can expand easily in the future as well. So I think with that, if there's any, Chad, see anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'm just going to add just a couple of points. I think it's important to note, staff certainly recognizes the cost of this project and what the request is significant. And I think that hopefully Dawn and Adam's presentation kind of emphasizes what the goals and objectives ended up to be, that this ended up to be more than just a City Hall remodel project. This project reflects nearly 30 years of use of this building and learning how the space works and how, more importantly, it doesn't necessarily work, whether it's in form, function, or efficiency. And based on that actual use, and then, of course, the feedback that Dawn received from those that she's spoken with and interviewed, really led to what you see here. There is obviously a dramatic transformation of this building. We do view it as a generational project, much like the decision to construct this building was a generational project in the late 90s. We anticipate, as Adam has mentioned, ideally at least 30 years of use from this building with probably little, if any, modification to it because of the way Dawn is proposing to better maximize unused space, to better utilize furniture that allows for flexibility and different uses within the newly created spaces. And we truly do hope that you see the grand scope of this. And there are a number of things that, while I want to compliment our building maintenance team, this building has been well maintained, but there have been deliberately made choices to defer some maintenance. And Adam has referenced some of those choices, whether you're looking at carpet, paint, replacing the office furniture or furnishings. Those decisions were all deliberately made with the recognition that the police would vacate space at some point, and then the City Hall staff could expand into that space. Other projects have been added into this, as have been mentioned. The Senior Center kitchen is a great example of that. Looking at things like the exterior space, including not just the light poles, but if you look around the soffits on the building, those soffits all need attention at this point in time. So that's something else that we would look to address through this project. So it is a big ask, a big lift. We get it. However, we do think that the value is there in 2027 versus trying to piecemeal this thing, in multiple different projects over the next, 10 to 15 years. We think this is almost a one and done situation for quite some time, but definitely for a generation. I think we'd be perfectly fine. Do we want to talk about kind of the plan and then go for questions? So I think I'm transitioning where you'd like me to go, perhaps, Adam, or we're on the same page here. One of the things that we've been looking at is how does this all happen logistically, right? We think that probably the best approach, based upon our conversations with Dawn, our engineer Paul Woodard, who's obviously been helping also with the police services facility, and then Adam and I, and then also in consultation with the employee work group that we have for this project. We actually think that the best approach and one we would like to utilize is to close City Hall while this remodel project is taking place. We have identified where we believe employees could work in other city-owned facilities, and we also believe that we could maintain a publicly accessible space for walk-ins during business hours in the community center. So we would still be able to maintain the public access that we have today, just in a slightly different location, in the community center. I think it's just outside the Prairie View room is what we're thinking right now. There's a few reasons why we think that this is the best option. One, it minimizes disruptions to staff. We know that noise and dust and all of those things will be some complicating factors to productivity and getting things done. We also recognize that displacing employees and moving them elsewhere is going to have a similar effect, but ideally this would be for create a shorter time period in which the project would need to be completed. We're trying to hit the window of after the April election, but before tax collection would happen in December. So we have roughly a 7-month period where we could look to get this done. And we're also optimistic that by allowing the contractor that gets this project full access to the entire building at one time, they ideally can get it done for less money than it would be to phase the project in and shuffle people and things around and have to work around city staff and other things. And ideally, the contractor would focus on this particular floor first, so that we could potentially get the public spaces perhaps open for things like meetings and so forth. Adam and I have accounted for spaces where meetings could take place between utilizing the Fitchburg room as well as the library meeting room on the second floor. And also the Hastahochi is also a potential possibility for meeting spaces. So we do believe we've at least conceptually accounted for most of the things related to employee relocation and meeting hosting. And we hope that the council ideally recognizes the benefit of that full closure. Again, we know that there will be some inconvenience to both staff and the public to some degree. We're trying to minimize all of those to the best extent we can in the shortest possible time period that we can do that, and also trying to get the best value from a bidding standpoint. So with that, anything to add, Dawn or Adam? No?
Thank you.
Questions?
Thanks, Chad. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, I fully support that, closing it down. During COVID, a lot of your employees work from home, so I would encourage you to follow that model if you don't have enough space or.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That is something that we will look at, and possibly some hoteling, where people might share a workspace and kind of alternate their work remote. So yeah, that we do appreciate that suggestion. And actually, the whole thought that City Hall was actually closed for a period of time to public access during COVID. So I guess we have kind of gone through that before. So that's a good point.
Yeah.
What's that?
Should have remodeled during COVID when nobody was here.
Good luck with that.
Finding the contractor might be more of a challenge.
Bill?
Yes, I've got a number of questions here. I guess, Dawn, can you just kind of give us some high-level ideas? How do you design for something that is not going to look dated even 30 or 50 years from now? I mean, is all of it going to turn into avocado and burnt orange at some point?
This is the challenge, as I'm looking at a lot of teal right now.
Yeah.
We talked about that and how to make things feel timeless. It is definitely a challenge. It is definitely a place that you can have a splash of color, do something that you think will be unique in a manner of, say, paint. That's not cost effective, not a ton of cost to replace that. There's a, beautiful palette in this building of oak. There's a little bit of cherry. There's redwood. So there is already a lovely palette in this building. I think that's exactly it. How do we remove what's dated and freshen this up? And then knowing what might want to change in another decade.
Yeah, and you mentioned at least one or two times recovering some corridor space. I'm all about efficiency. So, have you quantified how much kind of new space you've been able to discover here or make use of by eliminating corridors?
I know the quantity of meeting rooms has, the smaller meeting spaces, has at least doubled, and then including the smaller flex space, which doesn't exist today. And we've managed to do that without expanding the building footprint. The bit of space we can gain on third floor in the double height space, and I think it will better serve the corridor and the lighting and the acoustics. I think it'll be a soft touch, but a big improvement. And the senior center as well. How we managed to find more square footage for an additional office, more pantry storage. They can actually reclaim a conference room that they're using as a pantry today. Yeah, it was a lot of suggestions and a lot of problem solving and a creative team.
I got more. So you talked a lot about natural lighting as well. Tell me, is it all coming in from the sides, or is there a way to, with solar tubes or whatever, bring some light in from the roof rather than just the sides? Because I imagine the interior spaces, there's some workspaces that are going to be 40 feet from a window or something, right?
Yeah. That's interesting when you think, so the daylight down into the basement level, I think that's an opportunity that we have without a major structural expense. The third floor is actually the smallest footprint. So there are workstations that are adjacent to windows with circulation in that space. It's just the workstations are so tall today, you don't really get a look at the windows or get such a sense of view. So we didn't look at a vertical expansion to gain more daylight, but we think the horizontal shuffling of private offices is going to be successful. And on this level, when you're on the back side of the building, if you look at how tall the windows are, and you can tell in this space, they extend to the floor line. All of those windows in all of the offices are covered with drywall and a windowsill. So we're going to look at, can we remove a little bit of drywall and get more vision glass and bring more daylight into second floor, which is the biggest footprint and the biggest challenge, being away from windows.
I think one of the challenges, Bill, about bringing vertical light in is we wanted to avoid any protrusions through the roof.
Putting holes in the roof might not be a good idea.
Yeah, and then also with the solar panels up there, I don't know how that would impact where we could actually access the light as well. But I think it is important to note that we haven't heard a single negative comment from a department head who will be losing an office that is adjacent to windows. In fact, everybody has been unanimously supportive of moving their offices to the interior and allowing that daylight to be available for our staff who are working in cubicles. And the other thing that we're doing as well is those offices are actually shrinking in size to what they are today. And again, not a single department head has provided any negative feedback about getting into a smaller office as well. So I think there's a lot of things that we're collectively doing as staff for the benefit of this whole project to make it turn out as best as we possibly can.
Yeah, I think we've got the benefit of the tiny house wave. So a lot of good ideas for maximizing small spaces, right?
Like building a ship.
Yeah. So another question I have is about like space for artwork. Have we thought about how to incorporate, design the building such that you can put rotating display of art, or, and people are naturally drawn to it as they pass through certain parts of the building?
I'll even say that's already been in the works. Looking at a celebration wall, the wall of the mayor's photos where we're going to be relocating that. Trying to look at, long views when you don't have a view to a window, when you're on a longer walk in the building, that's a great place to introduce art. I've heard a lot that the art wants to reflect the community and really bring in the spirit of the community today into the artwork. I'm a fan of historic photos, but I also see the desire to incorporate the past and the present into the art displays in this building.
And one more. I don't know that you mentioned a lot about the mechanicals. Like right now, we're heated and cooled. We got boilers, and we're assuming with probably small ducts, assuming that it's kind of high temperature air moving through there. Eventually, this has got to be replaced with heat pumps that are going to move more air at a lower temperature. Do we need to increase our duct sizing? How much, are you planning for the future of how this is going to be heated and ventilated and cooled?
Today, Grafe Engineering is the mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineering design consultant on the team. They've talked through all of the maintenance of the existing systems with the building maintenance team as things have been upgraded. Like the VAV boxes, some of the controls have been already updated. So we're making sure that what we're proposing is kind of seamless with what's already been beginning to be improved at the building. We're looking at airflow calculations. With the increased capacity, we may have a couple areas where we need to supplement or improve the unit's capacity that's there today. All in all, it's been performing well. We're looking at the energy usage, though, and the studies and what we're going to be doing to improve the building's use, as now it will no longer be a 24/7 facility. How that changes how the system will be operating.
Yeah, and I didn't hear anything either about like building envelope improvements or higher performance windows or anything like that. Are we trying to kind of tighten up the building, make it a little more energy efficient?
In the areas that we will be modifying, we will definitely be improving the energy efficiency. We're looking at bringing in like a Mecco shade, a roller shade, rather than the mini blinds, which actually does help the performance of the windows as well and help staff with glare. Anything that we're improving, we will be improving the energy efficiency of. Low flow water usage for fixtures, lighting upgrades, improving energy usage there. So we're going to be studying the data of the reports that you have today to try to make the biggest impact with the improvements.
We're not planning on doing the windows with this project. A few windows I think would be done, even I think looking at eliminating those behind the dais here. But the windows are still in, except for that one, are still in pretty good shape, except for a few scatterings of the seal being broken on that one. But most of the windows around the city are actually in very good shape. So we're planning on not touching those for that reason, just because they're still good.
And I've heard that windows are kind of expensive. Do we have any metrics on, the performance of these windows compared with whatever might be top of the line today, so we can have a better idea of whether we should be changing out some of the windows at some point in the future?
We'll be working with Focus on Energy. It's a design team assistance program looking for funding to also support the project. I know on the police facility, for example, they looked at, well, what if it were triple pane glazing instead of double pane glazing? Different solutions like that that you could see the immediate cost impact and the likely payoff, and then see what funding is there to help that change, or if ultimately the first cost expense isn't something that we want to endure.
Jake?
Bill stole my question.
Oh,
But
Bill.
imagine that.
Who else would like to speak? Logan.
All right. So like Alder Jetzer, I have several questions as well. I will try to structure them broader and then more specific from there. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask the question that I am thinking of as I look at our finance director in the back of the room here, related to the cost of this project. Obviously, this is a Cadillac project that we are looking at. What we were looking at originally and expecting with just the first floor was maybe like, a Mitsubishi. Whereas, what do we have the ability to make a decision and review as the council? I would really like to see a middle option, whether we go with the 6 million, the 12 million, or somewhere in the middle. I think it would be helpful to the public and to us to make an informed decision to how much we want to spend and what we want to tackle versus what could be phased. I appreciate that there are efficiencies with doing everything at once as far as both the disruption and the, and the financials. I also think we have a $30-something million building across the street where we've got Hastahochi, we have 2 new fire stations, we're doing some work at Fire Station 1, we did some work in this building with the counter recently, so I'm just thinking, and then we had the referendum that didn't go through, so I'm trying to think of how we just kind of justify to the public that we are not just lavishly spending on everything and borrowing because we have a great credit or a great bond rating and just deciding to take advantage of that. So I guess that's a comment and a question, but I will turn it over and see what your thoughts are.
Yeah, no, as I mentioned earlier, we know that the ask is significant. But I think when you look at the scope, and I would describe it not so much as a Cadillac versus a Mitsubishi because we're familiar with what private sector workspaces may look like and what some companies may spend on those. And that's not what we're looking to duplicate here. What we're looking to duplicate is a space that is efficient and is appropriate for public service and is monitoring, what the actual impact is and even appearances for the taxpayers. But I wouldn't describe it necessarily as class of vehicle as a relation to this project. I would describe it more as, are we looking at, a 2-seater smart car, or are we looking at, a 16-passenger, van in scope? And I think that's how I would encourage the Common Council to look at it. And the finishes would be the same regardless if we bought the 2-person smart car or the 16-person van. That would be a consistent factor across it versus looking at a luxury vehicle versus a non-luxury vehicle. That is definitely something we're very conscious of. And I think we all recognize the investment that has been made in facilities over the last 10 years. And clearly the city is growing. Clearly city staff has grown. We recognize the levy limit constraints that don't necessarily allow us to add the staff that is needed. But ultimately, at the end of the day, this is probably, while expensive, the most efficient and to a large degree responsible way to go about this project with a long-term view on its impact for the taxpayer.
All right, thanks. Let me see where else here. Just looking at our overall current meeting space availability, what flexibility do our staff currently have to use space outside of these 4 walls? I'm thinking of the library or Hastahochi or Fire Station 1, Fire Station 3. Are those options that are currently available or could be considered either during construction or in any future state, regardless of yes, no, or maybe on this project?
We do anticipate utilizing all 3 fire department spaces as well as the flex space within the police department and some space in the community center for temporary work areas for city staff during this project. From a long-term perspective, I think that gets a bit more challenging. The more we decentralize staff, that can create communication problems, both within departments as well as across departments. So I think certainly the preference on continuing to improve and enhance our cross-department communication would be better to keep everybody here at City Hall. We do allow remote work currently up to 2 days for new employees after a period of adjustment to ensure that they're meeting expectations. We anticipate continuing to offer that as a workplace option. But by and large, we really want to create a space that, the vast majority of folks might not even really want to work remotely because they have a work area, whether it's an assigned cubicle or an assigned workspace that they're hoteling in with. But we have other areas where they can, pick a flex room if they want to work in that, or there's high top tables if they want to go stand at somewhere and do some work, or there's an area where they can go to take a Zoom call privately, or make a phone call to a doctor or a family member privately. Those are all spaces that we're lacking now. And I think that would also tie into, piecemealing this project, in that you would ultimately perhaps get, for instance, if we did the first floor in the basement right now, well, then a couple of departments might get the benefits of a newly remodeled space, and then other departments are, working in the existing space. And I think that could create some potential feedback from staff that might not be positive.
So during the remodel as well, too, if we're using space in the community center, that will also impact the programming in that space as well. So if we're using the Prairie Room or Fitchburg Room for meeting space or whatnot, so we're looking at shifting some of those possibly to Hastahochi, or, seeing what we can pause. So during the remodel, Hastahochi would be available for those extra spaces, but then we'd also be using space in the library for meetings as well, too. So looking at those groups and where they could possibly, relocate to, especially the public groups that reserve those spaces. So that's one of the challenges. We're trying to balance that as much as we can, and talking with Jill is trying to figure out which rooms are being used the most, and then if we had to kind of take over one of those rooms for 6 months, and that's why we selected the Prairie Room, just on usage and size. So it's kind of juggling a few things.
A couple of the small ones here then. Are there any more opportunities to look at some additional flexibility for indoor-outdoor spaces? I think of a nice day like today, that break room that looked pretty nice down in the first floor. Is there an opportunity to have the garage doors that the cool hip bars have, or the sliding doors that kind of, or essentially a glass wall that can then open up and provide more of an amenity in that way? Is that something that could be considered as part of a design before that comes before us? Or is that now contradicting my own comment about cost?
I can share, I tried as well. We talked about inefficiencies in having operable windows, especially when it's such a large group and such a variety of different people will be using it. So we did talk about the ability to have some operable glazing. I think by creating the patio space immediately adjacent to the break room, we're trying to get more of that indoor-outdoor by bringing in some wood trim accents on interior spaces by the larger windows, kind of like the senior center, having that wood ceiling run inside and outside. Trying in the details where we can to bring more indoor-outdoor connection, not physically though.
Okay.
I'll just add too, if I may, Alder Reichstead. Dawn's probably sick of hearing from Adam and I that we want low maintenance with an eye on future replacement, right? So much like any other project in the city, we're also, using that mantra as well. And while those amenities would have been great to have. From a maintenance and operations standpoint, they could have been problematic. And again, to the point you made, it might send also a different message to the public than what we would want to convey as far as the scope of this project.
Yeah. The other couple really small things here were, I noticed the FACTv studio was next to the elevator. I don't know if there's been feedback about that, but as somebody who used to work in TV news, that stood out to me as a potential problem with noise and vibrations and other unpleasant externalities. I really appreciated the approach to kind of that lightweight additions of the flex spaces, that it's not a big solid wall that kind of blocks the light and makes it feel, more enclosed. So like for the end of here, I'd love to see if a glass wall can't move in there, maybe even just a glass doors or something so that the light, that two-story light still continues. One of my favorite parts of this building is that vista when you walk in the door and see all the way down and see the Christmas tree in the winter or see the sunset when you're leaving City Hall. So I would love to see that continue if this is enclosed into space. And then the only other thing I was going to mention was I didn't see, were there any all-gender restroom facilities for the public and or in the staff spaces?
Yes, public on this level, and then as well the first floor renovation, we did include a single occupant shower room as well. That would be accessible.
Micah. Or Mayor, did you want to go first?
Yeah, just real quick on the noise comment on FACTv. We did bring in a sound expert. I forget his name. I forget his title, but
he's an acoustician, Craig from Third Lake Space. Yes, he walked through the space. He walked through the equipment that might be making noise in the elevator itself. When we were above the ceiling the other day, we saw spaces like the drywall doesn't extend to the structure in offices. It just stops above the ceiling tile. So there's a lot of sound transfer there. So the existing walls constructed in that area of the elevator probably aren't helping the condition either. But yes, we are focusing on that.
And that's been a comment from the beginning too, generally just about all the office spaces. The walls here paper thin. I mean, there's no insulation between the walls, like between my wall and Mike Zimmerman's. I can hear Mike clear as day on the phone. So, I mean, that's one of the things.
He does talk loud.
And a lot. So
great example.
we're looking at ways with that too, of just how can we do that to the ceiling, because obviously the sound is carrying through the ceiling, but it's also coming right through the wall. So we're looking at making improvements there.
I would also just add that Jeremy Crosby had an opportunity to connect with Dawn as well to talk about those sorts of items as well. So it's definitely on the radar, and we appreciate you bringing it up.
Micah.
Pretty much everyone asked all my questions. Just to go on to Logan's point, I like the outdoor patio space, and I think that would be used by people as a workspace. That would be helpful. The one thing I'd maybe recommend is if you could run like electrical out there, so people, if they actually want to use that as a workspace, is just have actual hookups, and then just to pay attention to kind of how that space is set up in terms of the light that comes in. I mean, like people you'll go out and try to work, and then the glare comes in and things like that. And so just putting some attention on kind of how you space that pergola and how you do those things, because I would want to go work out there in the summer, and to have as much outdoor space would be super helpful. And maybe you've already done all of this, but yeah.
Wonderful, in the works.
And then to add on to one of Bill's questions, just to clarify, so about the mechanicals in the building. So there's no mechanical equipment that's being replaced or done as part of this plan as it currently stands, or are there certain items that might be looked at?
I think we're still assessing that. There were some plans from building maintenance to do some replacements in the next year or two. So we're really kind of taking a look at what should be done now while the building is under remodel. So there could be an opportunity yet for that. We're still kind of sorting that out, which is also kind of driving where the budget request is at too, because there's some uncertainties on things like that mechanical side of things.
Okay. And then just one final point on this in terms of the overall budget. and we'll talk about more of this, I'm sure, when we actually move forward with this project. Working for municipal government is not the most lucrative position in the world, and the cost to the city of losing employees is a hidden cost that is not really recognized by a lot of people. And when you lose an employee, and the experience and the just time without that employee and the things that go along with that is, I would say, much higher than people realize. And so having a space that people want to come to work in and are willing to say, I want to work for municipal government, is one thing that we can provide to employees. And so that's just a point I wanted to make. So yeah, that's all I have.
Thanks. One question about what the $12 million includes. That would include like the physical renovation of the space, but also, I assume, furniture, moving, all of those, in between costs that are associated with the renovation?
Yes, audiovisual equipment. That's the full budget, including what we call the soft costs.
Yeah. And we do have other CAP projects that are not currently under that City Hall remodel that would be absorbed into this project. For example, the Senior Center kitchen, I think, had $500,000 or something budgeted for it. That was already budgeted. It's just in a separate project, but it will now be absorbed into the project. So there's, but I think the cost, it's a big number. But I think it's an investment, and I think it makes a ton of sense. And I think over the past, 6 years being in the council, I just have had to get used to how much things cost. Things just cost a lot of money, and if you want to get something good, and I trust that the staff is not going to put something that looks like it's in a Fortune 500 company in this building. That's not. This is going to be modest in the way that local government is, but high quality in the way that we should have it for our staff to have a workable space. And I also think it does make a ton of sense. I see exactly how the process went, where you're like, looking, how are we going to redo this space? And then once you figure out how you want to use it, you're like, well, we need to move that down here. And then what do we do with that space? And it just snowballs, right? Because this space doesn't work in a ton of ways. And like Administrator Brecklin said, you've had 30 years to figure out how this space does and doesn't work. And I look at these plans, and it's clearly very thoughtful and tied to the use of the space and the work of the city staff, and the fact that we'll be able to get another huge meeting space that's publicly accessible. That's wonderful. We really don't, we can do it in the library, but really that library space is for the public. It's not really meant to be only for public meetings, whereas we should have meeting space to accommodate that. And I think that's outstanding that we'll have that available. I think it's really thoughtful, and I look forward to seeing you all move forward, and I trust that you'll steward those resources well, as you always do. Mayor, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I have a couple of comments and questions. So thank you, Don, for the presentation. So one of the things I think that Bill asked that question, but it will be good for us to know how many square feet will be added, using spaces that we are not using now, beside the square feet from the police station, so that one would be nice to have that number, eventually, okay? The other thing that I, as a council member, I didn't have sometimes was a area or a meeting room, so council member can have a place to meet with residents or have a place to come before meetings, and we have our mail there. We used to have that way back 10 years ago. It was like the room. Where is the fun room? I don't know. The relax room. Yeah, that one was used to be a space for the Common Council. I remember when I started 11 years ago. But then they use it for other purpose, and it's fine because it's a great. The way they're using that space is great. But I would like to see if we can have a space for the Common Council. So that one is, I don't know, one of those common spaces or meeting rooms. I don't know, but I will. So right. The other thing for me as a mayor is safety. Is our safety here. Things have changed drastically, and so, and I would like to see something happen here, and we are in a meeting, how we are exiting this building, because right now we can't. And also, if we need to go under here, this, we don't have the protection. So safety for employees and safety for, elected official is very important for me as a mayor, if we can incorporate that in this design.
Yeah, those will be included.
Okay. Okay, thank you. What else? And the other question were answered. Oh, regarding the restrooms, are you planning to add more restrooms, or we are gonna, recycle the one that we have?
We're going to recycle and reconfigure and improve the access, improve the public access, the staff access.
Because what I noticed now is the employees, we had to share the restroom with the public because there is only one internally. You know what I mean? For all of us. So that one will be nice to see if,
Absolutely. Yeah. To have kind of this public space that once you're in this public realm.
But also the staff, they have more like a private.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And then the addition of the access to the first floor, having now 3 levels of space that you can access rather than just the 2 levels.
I haven't been there in the first, where the police is, the restroom. I haven't been there, so I imagine that there are restrooms.
Yeah. There will be restrooms there near the break room, near the patio. Yeah.
Okay.
Don, can you also mention the mother's rooms?
Yes, our goal was to have wellness rooms on every floor. This level, as you mentioned, the space that's dedicated to wellness now, it's just the public use, the demand is so high. So we located 2 wellness rooms on the first floor near the break room space, just to have those distributed well throughout the building.
And another thing that my company did when we moved to our new building is to have a space for moms. They are breastfeeding, to have a place where,
The wellness rooms, they'll include sinks, privacy, ability to control lighting.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the presentation. In terms of next steps, I assume we'll see an updated project in the CIP. And do we expect to revisit this at any particular point in the future, or will you just give us an update when things are happening?
Yeah, you'll definitely see an updated project plan and scope within the CIP with the updated budget request, which I think there's already about $750,000. So the actual request will be 11.3. I think there's 650. So ultimately, it'll be a $12 million ask, and then we will certainly keep the Common Council informed on the progress.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Have a nice evening. We'll invite our finance director, Misty Dodge, up to do a presentation on capital improvement plan and financial policy guidelines, our annual presentation to get us ready for CIP season. Mayor, anything you want to share about the CIP process? It's coming soon.
And finance.
Awesome.
Excellent. Thanks for letting me get situated. So as you mentioned, this is our annual kind of CIP kickoff. I'm not going to talk about strategies or what projects are included, any of that stuff. That will be in the mayor's proposed CIP that gets released next week. My purpose here tonight is to kind of talk about that context that we should know going into that process. I know there hasn't been that much turnover since I did this last year, so I'm going to cruise through a lot of it. But there's a couple of particular things I want to focus on, especially what our status is on our financial policies and that type of a thing. So I will cruise through all of this. Our budget at the city is primarily funded by property taxes. That's a somewhat unique thing in Wisconsin, that we're very heavily funded that way. But that is our reality. And so included in the 2026 budget are a variety of charts as we look at what that tax burden is, We will often focus on that average home tax bill because the values and the rates are kind of related and get distorted. So you can't really look at what your tax rate has done because it's offset by values. So we really try to focus on what that average home tax bill is to get a better feel for what taxes are doing in the community. So this chart is from our 2026 budget. You can see over the many years kind of what that average home tax bill was. And there is a bit of a dip in 22, 23, and 24, and then it's been going back up. Those are the years that we closed those TIDs, a couple of big TIDs, in fact, so that really helped bring that tax burden down, but now it's been increasing again. And then this is a page from the budget that I like because it talks about that average home value and then how that tax bill would be split amongst all of the different departments, along with our transit, library debt service, and capital projects fund. There's a bit of a flaw in here because it assumes that everything is prorated. So if the police budget, for example, is X percent of the total budget, then that same percentage of the property taxes go there. That's not quite right because there's other revenues that might impact certain other departments, but this does give kind of a general view for how that is allocated across the city. And then we look at multifamily apartments as well. As you know, property taxes are billed to property owners, but are often passed on to renters too. So we try to put that context in the document also. As we're talking about the CIP, the two funds that we will focus on the most would be the capital projects fund, by far. That's where most of our capital stuff is. And then also the debt service to a bit of a lesser extent. We won't really talk about the general fund or the library fund in much detail because those are primarily operating things and will be discussed more so during the operating budget side. And then this chart just shows kind of how the history has over the last 10 years, how each one of those amounts have increased. So over the past 10 years, our total property tax levy has increased an average of 5.8% per year. I included some things about the TIF and the personal property tax that was repealed. Again, I included everything in here so that you have it as a resource. I won't dwell on it. Of course, if you have questions, happy to focus more. But going into the CIP Capital Improvement Plan, so focused really on capital. We define capital under our ordinances as anything that's $10,000 individually. And then we also include things that are $50,000 as a group and purchased infrequently. So for example, our police radios, the radios that all of the officers have are like $1 million between all of them. Individually, they're a couple $100, but when we spend that much money at one time, we want to be able to plan for that. Computers are kind of the other side. So we do spend a lot of money on computers, but we do it on a more routine basis. So we don't include those in the CIP. It's just part of the operating budget. So that's kind of what the distinction is between capital and operating. And then as we're talking about the CIP, we have a 10-year plan. The first 5 years, I call them the front five. Those are the projects that are more vetted. They're more likely to happen. Probably still some shifts as we learn more information, as priorities shift, as costs come in, that stuff. But are pretty solid that the city will be doing this project to some degree at some point in this ballpark. And then we have the back five, so years 6 through 10. Those are placeholder projects. So those haven't really been vetted. We kind of want them on the radar so we know that they're coming, but it will likely change a lot between the time when it's in the back five and when it actually comes to fruition. So just kind of keep that distinction in mind too. One, that it's a plan. It can change. We expect it to change. We do this every year. And then two, really kind of focus on what those current first 5 years are, but also you don't want to just push everything to the back five because that's not financially sustainable either. So having that balance there. The operating budget, which we will kick off after the CIP process is done, that really is a formal document. So that is appropriated funds. At that point, you are telling staff, hey, I want you to go do these things and here's the money to do them. So it's much more purposeful or has more intention with it than say this plan that we're doing. And for the budget, the purpose of that one is we say these are the services we want to provide, this is the cost of that service, these are all of the other revenue sources we have, and the difference then is how much in property taxes we have to collect. So I bring up what that difference is now, not to kind of start talking about the budget, but just to understand that it is a slightly different purpose in the overall process. The process is similar, but has a different goal. So budget constraints, this is always the not fun part to talk about, but the biggest, not biggest, one of the bigger ones would be the taxpayer ability and willingness to pay. So we do include in our property tax bill what that looks like. So for every dollar that we collect on a property tax bill, only about a third of it actually goes to the city of Fitchburg. And then you can see in the pennies kind of how that is allocated then to the different functions of the city. So when you're thinking about, what projects we're going to fund, you should think about, can the taxpayers afford these increases? And then also, are they willing to pay for these increases or changes, depending on the priorities?
Misty?
Yeah.
I just wanted to, every time I see this graphic, I want to say thank you for putting it everywhere you can, because this was just such a great add to our tax mailers, and I'm glad to see it here too.
Excellent.
So I'm just going to continue to say gratitude every time I see it.
Thank you. We had been doing it by a pie chart, but you're right, just the visual of the dollar bill, I think, has just resonated more. So I'm glad you found value. One of the other constraints we have is the optional expenditure restraint incentive program. So this is an optional program. We are not required to participate in it, but if we do, we get money from the state to incentivize us. So we've been participating in this program for quite a while. It does have a different calculation than what, say, levy limits has. So it's a different formula, and so we may qualify for one and not qualify for the other depending on the situation. So it is different. And when we talk about the CIP process, we have that in our mind as far as will we qualify for expenditure restraint or not as a part of this plan, but it's not really the focus of the CIP. When we get to the budget process, that's where we have to pass a budget that meets those ERIP requirements, or else we won't participate in the program.
Misty, when do you foresee us graduating out of meeting the mill rate of 5 per thousand?
Next year. So possibly with this 2027 budget. We don't have the equalized values yet, and of course we don't know what our levy quite is going to be yet. But my guess is if not the 2027 budget, probably for sure by the 2028 budget we'll be below the 5 mills. And so we do have a policy which has helped us because you don't want to become reliant on that aid, because that's just a structural deficit that has to be addressed. So the city has historically qualified for the aid in year one, received the payment in year two, and then applied it to capital purchases in year three, which has really helped us as we've been seeing a lower benefit each year to participating in this program. So we've had more time to kind of address it, but we definitely will be not eligible in the near future. And then I included the history of that programs you can see. So for the 2026 budget that we are operating under now, in 2027 I expect to get about $120,000 in aid. 2 years ago we were at $650. 5 years ago we were at $750. So that number has decreased quite a bit. I also say the form that I have to fill out to certify to the state that we qualify for the program, that came out a couple months ago, and about a third of the municipalities that qualified for the program last year because of the tax rate do not qualify this year. So that's a limiting pool as more and more people aren't able to qualify. So we do continue to have conversations with the legislature about what the utility of this program is, and does this make the most sense, or is there a better way to do it? But absent state legislation, this is the program that we have. The other big one would be the state-imposed levy limits. So opposite of ERIP, which is an optional program, we can choose to or not choose to. Levy limits are a statute. We are required to comply with levy limits. And then if, for whatever reason, either a mistake is made or council chooses to violate levy limits, there's a dollar-for-dollar penalty out of our state aid as well. So council, in theory, could pass a budget that doesn't meet levy limits, but it just takes more money out of our aid and gets us nowhere. So that's the more important focus of both the CIP and the budget process. As we're going into the CIP, what we want to do is have at least in the ballpark of an increase in the levy each year of what we think approximately net new construction is going to be, because that net new construction is the primary driver of the levy limits. And it takes quite a bit of net new construction in order to get to a reasonable percentage. So for this coming year, going into the 2027 budget, in order to even get a 2% increase on our levy limit, we have to have $134 million worth of new value. And to hit 3%, it'd be over $200 million worth of new value just to hit that. So not surprisingly, we are not expected to get up to 3%. Working with the city assessor over the last couple of months, we're not complete, or he's not complete with his process, but we think it's going to be about 2.5% where we expect to land for this coming year. And we'll know for sure that first week in August. So I included a chart so you can see our Fitchburg's net new construction is the blue bars. And then if you assume inflation kind of over time, long term is a 3%, you can see our net new construction recently is not matching that inflation estimate. And we did have a couple of years of areas where we did have more, but that additional net new construction went to additional services to service that new area. And so that's the big flaw with net new construction. So yes, if net new construction matched inflation, we'd be even, but in order to pass or to get a budget that's sustainable, we also have those additional inflationary pressures, and we have additional needs. If we have $200 million worth of new value that comes to the city, it's probably more residents, it's probably more streets that need to be maintained and plowed. There's probably more services that need to be provided beyond just inflationary on our status quo. So I'd say that's the flaw in net new construction. I'd like to get to the next constraint is the maintenance of effort. So a couple years ago, when they gave us that big increase in our shared revenue at the state level, they did impose maintenance of effort requirements on our public safety. So it is a constraint that we need to keep in mind, as most of our budget in public safety is personnel, and as personnel costs continue to increase, I don't expect this maintenance of effort to be a significant hurdle for us to worry about going into the budget process, but it is something to kind of keep in mind as we're putting together our budget too. And if we don't meet the maintenance of effort requirements, it's a 15% penalty on our shared revenue, which is pretty significant.
Misty?
Yep.
So can you walk us through that at a high level? Like, what exactly does that mean? Like, if we were to approve some new initiative in the PD or the FD and do it on a trial basis. So for a couple years, we have additional expenses. Mm-hmm. If we decide, no, that's not working out, and we back that dollar amount out, are we in trouble? Does it have to ratchet up, or is there just some threshold that we need to meet every year?
Yeah, so it is year after year that you have to meet it, but it's not based on total budget. So for police department, it's the number of sworn officers. It could be cost, but it's only on the personnel cost, not on the total budget. So you wouldn't want to say hire 10 police officers as a pilot and then say, hey, we don't need them and we're going to lay them off. That would be a pretty clear violation of the maintenance of effort option, but on the operating side outside of personnel wouldn't necessarily be a concern. So it's really focused on the staff. And then on the fire side, it's non-capital expenditures, so that would apply more to your example. And then it's the number of firefighters, level of training, and response time. And you have to qualify 2 out of those 4. And so we can choose each year which 2 out of those 4 we meet in order to continue to qualify. Next, I'd like to talk about our adopted financial guidelines. So the council revised these just back in 2025, so a little over a year ago. So why do we have these? Really, they demonstrate that we're focusing on what that long-term financial is, helps us have that foundation to make sure we're making good financial decisions, and then also those guardrails for us as we're looking at what we want to do in the long run. And so Fitchburg's credit rating, back in 1995, we were an A. You can see we progressed every so often. We were A1 in 1996, AA3 in 99, AA2 in 2002, AA1 in 2010, and then in 2024, which was the last time we borrowed money, we got up to that elusive AAA, which is the gold standard, right? It's Moody's saying that we are a great credit risk, we are very financially responsible and sustainable. And seeing that growth, that's been a lot of financial discipline over lots of councils in order to get to that point. And so it's really something that the council should be very proud of, that growth and that reaching that AAA point. And so our credit rating is available out on the city's website if people were interested in it. There are a couple of excerpts I wanted to point out. When Moody's gave us that AAA rating, a couple of things they thought were especially impressive was our proactive budget management. Our management is strong, and you guys utilize those formal financial policies that we take very seriously. Our credit strength is the robust financial position. And then our credit challenge, of course, which we just talked about, is levy limit. So we can't get away from levy limits, but we can do what we can to mitigate that impact as much as we can and still be positive. So then going into those guidelines, so there's a handful of them. First, looking at the capital budget guideline. So this talks about when we will cash finance versus when we will borrow for things. So we will generally cash finance our annual street maintenance, all equipment purchases that are less than $500,000 individually, and then all facility projects that are less than $500,000 individually. And then we will borrow possibly for individual pieces that are $500,000 or more and have a life of 10 years or more. So that's one of our first policies. That's important because the more money you borrow, the more it costs because you have to pay interest on it, but then also it costs money in order to borrow that. And we have been following that guideline. Our next one is on the structure of our debt issuance. And so we say that we don't want to have a big balloon payment. So we're going to pay off our debt at a normal clip. We don't want to say have really low payments and then a balloon payment on year 10 because that just kicks that can down the road. And that could be devastating to our taxpayers in particular if there's 1 year where that really hits. So our current year actual is that over 70% of our debt as of the end of 2025 will be paid off within the next 10 years. Though I'll mention that that's a bit skewed, as are all of these debt metrics, because we haven't issued debt in 25 or 2026. So it's a lot of these are arbitrarily somewhat better than what they may be if we would have borrowed the last couple of years. But we do need to borrow soon for some of those projects. But still perfectly reasonable, definitely within our policy. The next one is that we want to have our equalized tax rate for debt service to not exceed $2.25 per value. Reason why that's important is that's kind of like your mortgage payment if you buy a house. You want to make sure that you have enough money to pay that debt back, pass that on to our taxpayers. And we are well within that metric as well. Though again, it's arbitrarily low because we haven't issued debt the last couple of years. But that's at 81 cents as of the 2026 budget. There's also a state statute that talks about how much debt we can have outstanding in total. And then as a city, we further restrict ourselves to a lower amount just to give ourselves some cushion in case something happens. So the statute is 5%. Our metric is 3% of equalized value. And that's important. For example, a couple years ago, they fully repealed the personal property tax. So that it significantly reduced our equalized value. And so that pretty significantly changed this metric. And so that's why we want to make sure that we have that cushion in there so that we don't violate state statute. That would be a problem. And as of the end of 2025, we were at 0.83%. So that's 28% of our metric and 17% of the statute. So we're doing good there too. And then our last, I think this is our last debt metric, is how much of our debt, or how much of our budget do we want to spend on debt as compared to all overall budget. We're saying 15 to 25% of our levy funds. So if we look at the general fund, library, transit, debt service combined, we want our debt piece of it to be 15 to 25%. because we don't want to be too leveraged as we're looking at our future projects. And we are at 18.5% for the 2026 budget. So we're really right where we should be. The next section of our financial policies is for fund balance. So we do have in our policies what our different categories are for fund balance, which is non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned. These are the required categories under our reporting rules. For assigned fund balance, there is a fair amount of items that have been assigned by the council. So the shared revenue that we get each year, so that's 1.6 million is what we get in shared revenue. We also have an amount in our budget that we are using for future budgets, and then employee compensated absences, and then the pilot. So these are all of the assignments that we've made over the past 5 years. You notice it's a pretty big jump from 2021 to 2025. The biggest reason for that is our applied fund balance in future years. So we've been purposefully and intentionally and strategically using our one-time fund balance on capital projects, one-time capital projects, which is a reasonable method. So it's explainable why that's going up so much, but it is a pretty big jump between what we had been spending of our fund balance 5 years ago versus what we're spending now. The fund balance policy that often gets looked at the most is what your unassigned fund balance would be. Our policy is between 15 and 25% of total general fund revenues. That's important so that if something happens, we have that cash available to get it addressed and then also help us with our cash flow throughout the year. And we were at 15.2% as of the end of 2025. So again, right at the bottom of that floor, I actually couldn't do the full amount of the transfer that we had planned to because I would have fallen below that policy. So we are right at that floor. I'm not concerned because I think it's still intentional, it's strategic, it's been deliberate, but it is something to kind of keep an eye on still. Sorry. So this is a chart from the 2024 audit because we're working on next year's.
Could I ask a question about that? Because I'm just like trying to think through the minimum. Because if the unassigned fund balance at its core is meant to help us weather unexpected expenses, if we're not allowed to spend it because we're going to go below that floor, are there circumstances upon which we can spend it and go below the floor? Because like it's there to spend, right? It's there to help us meet budget gaps. So it's like I understand why the policy exists because we don't want it to get too low. But if you are prevented from using the money when we need it, that seems also like a problem.
So we're not prevented from using it, and we even can fall below the floor if it is a true emergency, right? So if a tornado rips through and we need to do a bunch of things and we will maybe get reimbursed by FEMA or our insurance company, but we don't know, and we just need to get it done, perfectly acceptable use of fund balance, even a reasonable reason to go below your floor. What I was talking about is that we were using the amount that was above the policy for one-time purchases in the capital projects fund and kind of peeling it off. That isn't a good reason to dip below your policy because it's not an emergency, it's not unplanned, right? It's a
we can
different
allocate
purpose.
it from other sources. Okay, thanks.
And so then this chart again is from our audits. You can see kind of how we've fallen over the last 5 years. But I would just like to reiterate that it was purposeful, intentional, strategic. So it's not something to be concerned. And then we have some policies around the enterprise funds or our utility funds. So we want to keep unrestricted cash of at least 250 days in each one of our utilities. It's important, similar to fund balance, that kind of helps us weather our situation. In the water utility, we were at 1,057, but as you know, we've got a lot of big projects that we're going to be going on soon, so it's that number will probably be falling. The sewer utility is at 386 days, which is reasonable, especially considering most of our sewer utility is a pass-through from MMSD. So being relatively close to what I would say is our floor is not a problem. The one I'm more concerned about would be the stormwater utility. So being at 270 days, yes, it's above that policy, but that policy is minimum, right? So we'll be looking at what we need to do there to help get those rates aligned more with what the budget has been spending. We'll have more information once the audit comes out. So I'll pause for a second quick on policies. Otherwise, I'm almost done, I swear. So we've got a bunch of information out on the DOR's website so you can compare kind of how Fitchburg is versus other municipalities and how we spend, how our values are, what our TIDs are. There's a lot of really great information out there on this local government dashboard, and it's all very visual. So it's kind of fun to play around with if you're a data geek like I am. So lots of examples. You can see kind of our history over the many years. So lots of cool things. And then the last thing I want to talk about is our next steps. So when we're doing the CIP, we always start with what was approved last time. That's kind of our starting point. Department heads will look at that information and make recommendations to the mayor on what they think should be different, whether it's different dollar amounts, different years, different projects, adding projects, removing projects, all of that. So department heads make those recommendations to the mayor. The mayor's CIP comes out next week. That's where you'll see what that proposal is for the next 10 years. And any changes from the last adopted CIP to the mayor's proposed CIP will be specifically called out within the document. So you can see exactly what it was that changed. So then once that comes out, we have department head presentations. At the next committee of the whole meeting, Ellers will be here to talk about our financial management plan. So when I'm talking financial policies, it's kind of looking backwards. You know, what have we done so far? The financial management plan is taking the mayor's proposed CIP and looking forward. What do our policies look like? Are we still within policy? So it's more prospective there. So once we have all that information, council will have the opportunity to put in their proposed changes. Amendments are due at noon on July 6th. And then we'll go through a very similar process to the last two. So you will submit the amendments to me. I will compile them. I will get staff memos if there's more information that just needs to be part of the conversation. I'll put out a packet so you guys can have all that information, and then we'll go amendment by amendment, make a decision, amend the amendment if you choose to, whatever you want to with the CIP. We do not take amendments from the floor because we want to make sure that the public and everybody is aware of what you're considering. We don't want there to be some surprises on the floor right before it's adopted. And then the other big thing that's different about the CIP versus the budget is we do it on a normal council night. Because in theory, there should be fewer CIP amendments than what there may be budget amendments. So we do it all in that one meeting, the second meeting in July. Once we have an adopted CIP, because it is a plan, that first year gets rolled into the first draft of the operating budget that I provide to the mayor, but she is able to make changes at that point too. But again, we will call out specifically any changes from that adopted CIP to the mayor's proposed budget so that you're very aware and the public is very aware of any changes that were made. So that's all I have. A pause for questions or discussion.
Jake?
This is just me still learning how all of this works, but why is the library and transit separate from the rest of the budget?
Yep. So the library is separate because they have some unique statutory authority where the city council provides a dollar amount in property taxes to the library, but then the library board has discretion over how they spend it. And so it's the example, or the phrase I always heard is we kind of throw it over a wall, that money, and then the library has that authority. So it's a separate accounting mechanism for them to keep track of that. Transit was in the general fund up until a few years ago, and then we moved it to a special revenue fund because we now get a fair amount of state aid for it. So again, just to kind of separate it and have it be its own box so we can run reports and figure out all of that stuff. So it's more of an operational efficiency.
Thank you.
Of course.
Did I miss a slide on, I stepped away for a minute. Did we miss a slide on replacement funds? Did we talk about that at all?
Nope, I have them later. I figured people were aware what they were and why we were doing them, but happy to talk about them again. Just since we have a brand new
council member, I think it's important for the strategy.
Yep.
Because it also, it's so in the CIP document.
Absolutely.
That if you don't understand what they are, you're like, what are these charges? So, yeah.
Yeah. So equipment replacement funds are kind of like sinking funds. It's kind of the terminology that you would use in personal finance. So it's the mechanism by which we fund our already existing equipment. So we have an inventory of all the different equipment that we have that meets that threshold for capital. We figure out what the replacement cost would be, what the trade-in value would be, so kind of what the cash would be if we wanted to replace it. And then we look at how many years we think that that will last to get what that annualized cost is, and then we save that amount each year so that when the next replacement comes on, we have the cash available to make it. There is an inflation factor built in there. The last adopted plan was a 3% inflation. As we know, costs are skyrocketing these days. So it's a way for us to stay on top of our existing equipment without having to have kind of those peaks and valleys that go throughout. And so if you look at, I guess, for example, so if we had a $550,000 piece of equipment, we thought we would get $50,000 when we traded it in or sold it. It's a net cost of $500,000. With a useful life of 10 years, we would set aside $50,000 in year one. With a 3% inflation, we'd set aside $51,500 in year two, and that cash then would build up along with the interest revenue that we earn on it, so that hopefully that inflationary factor will meet whatever the new cost is when we go to replace it. The benefits of it is it really demonstrates from a financial sustainability measure, again, what the impact is financially of all of the equipment that the city has, all of our squad cars, all of our plow trucks, all of our public works equipment and parks equipment, right? There's a lot of equipment that is needed to run this city that can often get overlooked when you're talking about budget stuff. So it's a way for us just to commit to say, we know that there's a cost to providing the services that we're currently costing, and we are committed to continuing to provide those costs. And then from an operational standpoint, it's really helpful for departments to have these funds too, because it gives them a lot of flexibility. So if you have an inventory of, say, 10 plow trucks, and you know that this one is going well, and I don't need to replace it, but this other one broke down, you have that flexibility as a department head to do what you need to do to get your job done. There's also, because there is that plus or minus kind of in there, we can budget more aggressively because we don't have to assume that, say, the costs are going to skyrocket, because we'll know that one year that it was lower, so now we can absorb when the costs do go up in another year. So it's a way to give more flexibility and operational responsibility to the department heads. And it also reduces the likelihood of that deferred maintenance, because you know that the money is available when you need it, and so you're not going to do a project now because the money's going to go away if you don't do it, but you're also not incentivized to defer it because you're trying to get something else done.
Micah.
Can I ask a question on that? So you said we earn the interest on what's in the fund balance. Do we allocate that interest into that fund balance for every CIP replacement fund every year?
Every replacement fund, yes.
Okay. Yep. And then when we determine whether something is going to have a replacement fund or be debt financed in the future, do we use the purchase price of the item initially, or do we use the inflation adjusted purchase price for when we will actually replace it?
Yeah, it's kind of a judgment call. So the financial policy just talks about the purchase cost. It doesn't necessarily say if it's this one or next one. In general, there's not many things that kind of cross that threshold over the life of the equipment, so it's not usually a different answer, but you could argue either way.
Misty?
Yep.
How good do you feel about having replacement funds given levy limit constraints? Is there going to come a time when we're going to have to give this, prudent financial strategy up simply because there isn't enough tax revenue to support the services needed by the city?
Right. I, of course, hope not. I think a lot of other municipalities our side have been successful with this same strategy and has been able to weather it. I do realize it takes financial discipline in order to commit to the status quo, but I think it's a challenge that should be accepted by the policymakers.
Dave.
When did we start? That's somewhat recent, that we started allocating. Do you recall what year we started that, Misty?
Yep, so we first piloted them in probably 2017, 2018, something in the ballpark. So we started with some police department equipment. We realized, we wanted to make sure the mechanics of it worked, and then we've been expanding it to a lot of the other areas, again, for those benefits that we talked about.
Thank you.
Yep.
So the interest, so Micah said that the interest that's generated off a replacement fund stays in that replacement fund, but is that accounted for in the calculation of how much to put into the replacement fund year over year? Because like obviously you have inflation, but you also get interest
Right.
on the revenue. So if we're not accounting for both of those things, we might be saving too much money.
So not exactly, because the inflation is just year to year. And so if you think year 1 to year 10, the 3% increase we're just doing year to year. It's not the full 3 years times 10 years. So the interest revenue backfills that difference in how we set up for it.
So it is accounted for in the calculation?
Yes. As far as the math exercise, yes, it's built in.
My other question about this is how much of our operating budget is tied up in replacement funds at this point in time?
Yep. I'd have to look. I would say it's probably quite a bit because you also think of our annual street maintenance is really a replacement fund. Our path maintenance is really a replacement fund, right? There's a lot of things that we do that we may not have called a replacement fund in the past, but really are them. So it is quite a bit of money, and I suspect that that's pretty routine for municipalities.
Yeah.
The only things that really would be your big building facilities, right? We build a police facility, we're remodeling City Hall, those types of things you would often not do on that type of annualized basis, but most other things would be.
I would be interested in, and I feel like street resurfacing is kind of a different bucket. I wouldn't consider them replacement funds in the same way. I know that they are, I guess technically, but they're different they're different in nature. But it'd be interesting to know other communities that are similar to us, how much money they're putting into replacement funds in a similar way, and if we are above or below what other municipalities are doing, because there's that tension with levy limits where debt service is not subject to levy limits, but everything else is. And if you're tying up millions of dollars in a replacement fund where some of that money could be debt financed, you're taking it away from a potential use of operating funds. And I understand that that's not like, that's a terrible choice to make because we're in a position that we can't make the choice just to increase the budget to hire more firefighters, for example. But I'm just curious how other municipalities are weighing that choice. And I don't know if that probably is an easy thing to compare. Maybe there's not even a way to compare those numbers 1-to-1, given how people budget. But it's just something that I think about a lot, especially as I've been sitting in this seat for a long time. And every time you go through that process and we look at the next budget cycle and how tight it is, it's something I think about.
Can I push back on one piece of it?
Absolutely.
So there was one point where you said that the replacement funds are things that we could have otherwise borrowed for, and that's the one piece I would challenge you on. So the replacement fund, that inventory, anything that's $500,000 individually and thus would be eligible for borrowing under our financial policies is not in the replacement fund. So we only are doing replacement funds for things that we would not borrow for under our financial policies. And then to your real question about how other municipalities do it, it is a bit of a challenge because the concept of it is very similar to lots of other municipalities across the state, especially our size, but they might do it a little differently. So for example, I was at a conference where a municipality shared how they do it, where they have a separate fund for all of their capital equipment and they lease out that equipment to the operating budget. It's really the same structure where you're charging an annualized cost to the levy and paying it back and you're replacing things, but it's just done differently under a different name. So it's hard to compare apples to apples there because it is different but the same concept, if that makes sense.
And is our replacement fund policy, is like you talked about that policy of it being $500,000, is that one of the financial policies that's laid out that what we just discussed? Or is that kind of just like how we do replacement funds?
Yep, so the cash financing is in our financial policy. The replacement fund is the structure by which we meet that policy. So the alternative would be, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So the alternative would be, instead of kind of evening those out year after year and building up the balance and having the interest and all that, is you would instead budget each year for which individual piece of equipment that you plan to replace, which is an option, but then you would possibly have peaks and valleys, and then there's a lot of incentive to shift things back simply to meet things, and so that it's back to you're encouraging that deferred maintenance. You're encouraging to hold things on for longer than you can because you didn't plan for them financially.
Micah.
Sorry, I had one more. And this maybe more applies to like the large, so like the public works one where there's 50 line items on this replacement fund. When we say something comes in under the inflation adjusted price, or we hold something for 12 years instead of 10 years. And so it's a $100,000 item, 10 years, we hold it for an additional 2 years and then buy a new one. So we will at that point have contributed $20,000, let's say no inflation, $20,000 extra dollars to the replacement fund. Do we adjust the replacement fund? Do we ratchet down the replacement fund for the item that we just purchased by that $20,000 over the life so that we kind of take advantage of that savings?
So not exactly, but the way that we do address it is we would update the purchase price. So if the cost came in quite a bit less, if it was expected to be $200,000 and it came in at $100,000, using very extreme examples, we would adjust the cost for the next one to that new estimated cost. So we should be reviewing what that cost would be every so often.
What would happen to the, sorry to cut you off, what would happen to the $100,000 then?
Yeah, so again, super extreme example. Most likely what would happen, especially in the public works one, is that there's other pieces of equipment that come in significantly higher than what we thought that they were going to, and that plus or minus kind of evens out. So like I'll say, we've got a 3% inflation assumption built into all of these as of the last adopted CIP. The plow trucks in particular are like 25 or 30% more than what we thought that they were going to be. And so especially in years of high inflation, that is less of a realism or realistic opportunity for what we're doing. The other risk of, say, dropping it to say we're going to do less now in the future is you're building yourself a structural deficit if that isn't sustainable in the long run. So if you take out that $20,000 and use it for another one-time thing, that I'm not concerned about. But if you say, well, now we're not going to do $20,000 for perpetuity, eventually that would, in theory, catch up to you.
Sure. Okay. Bill's got it.
Bill?
Yeah. So I guess maybe circling back a little bit with the, the question about what fraction of our operating budget is tied up in replacement funds. Mm-hmm. You said quite a bit, but 2/3 or more of our budget is personnel, right? And so this would be quite a bit of the remaining third, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then, boy, I think I had another one, but it would spend too long. Oh, I know what it was. So we've only recently started doing replacement funds. We're kind of rolling it out as projects come along, right? So like, the amount of replacement funds should be ever increasing until we eventually reach saturation point where all of our projects of 500,000 or less are covered by replacement funds. Where are we along that curve from nothing at all to completely funded?
I would say looking at just the things that are not debt financed, right? So just the things that would be 500,000 or less. We have included replacement funds for nearly everything that we've identified. So the things that won't be in there are things that, for whatever reason, staff doesn't have on an inventory. So for example, there's a piece of equipment in the senior center kitchen that wasn't on an inventory before, that wouldn't have a replacement fund set up for it. But things that we know that we have, that the departments are using every day, that they have a replacement schedule for, are almost exclusively on replacement funds.
Okay, so we shouldn't expect to see that number continually increase significantly beyond what it is now.
Nope. And especially because we group them, right? So we have one equipment replacement fund for public works and one for parks and one for fill in the police department, one for fire department. Because again, the benefit of these is having as much flexibility for the department so that they can manage their operations the best way. And so if there's a new piece of equipment in the police department that hadn't been on an inventory before, it would get added to the inventory versus a separate replacement fund being set up.
Other questions for Misty? All right, seeing none, we can wrap it up there. Anything else you wanted to share?
Nope.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Well, we are going to have lots more discussion on that. We are at the end of our agenda items. Next is announcements. Our next committee of the whole meeting will be June 24th, 2026. I will take a motion to adjourn.
Before we do you have a topic for June?
Yes, in June, Ellers will be doing the financial management plan, which is an annual presentation, and then they will stay to do a TID 101 and an intro on residential TID. So it's going to be an Ellers Palooza. your council chambers.
Then I will make the motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned at 8:33 p.m. Thank you, everybody.